Hey everybody, I'm Zoe.
And I'm Chandi.
And this is Bound by the Cloak. The Selway-Bitterroot Wilderness covers over 1.2 million acres in Idaho and Montana combined. It is one of the largest wilderness areas within the United States, with the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness just to the south. With its dense forests, rugged terrain, lakes, rivers, streams, and majestic mountains and ridges, it's both beautiful and terrifying. There's a chance that being out in the wilds of Montana's wilderness, you may not see or hear another soul for days. Pacific Northwest forests in the United States can be treacherous and unforgiving. Over 2,000 people go missing in Pacific Northwest forests in the United States every year. The majority are rescued. A small percentage are found deceased, and an even smaller number are never seen or heard from again.
In August 2019, Kaden Laga embarked on what was supposed to be a routine horseback ride in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana. However, the journey quickly turned into a fight for survival when he got separated from his group and found himself lost in the vast, rugged wilderness. Over the next 5 days, Kaden faced unimaginable challenges, from treacherous terrain and severe weather to the threat of wild animals. For these 5 grueling days, he battled against nature, relying on his wits, endurance, and sheer willpower to stay alive. Kaden's story is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the unyielding will to survive. Hi, Kaden. How are you?
Hi. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for joining us on the show. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Kaden Laga. I live in Utah. I was on a horsepacking trip that went awry, and I ended up without any food, water, or supplies for 5 days in the Montana Bitterroot Wilderness and had to navigate my way out.
So can you tell us what happened to you?
My dad, was a pretty seasoned outdoorsman. And so all growing up, we would go on these big week-plus backpacking and horsepacking trips in the Tetons, Sawtooths, Frank Church Wilderness area, all kinds of different spots in the Northwest in the United States. And so I would go back once per summer and do a trip with him. They were much shorter when I came back just because it was rough to get much time off of work. And we would go and do some of these trips. And so I went with my dad moved to Montana after I left the house. And so he started to do a lot more trips up there in the Montana Bitterroot Wilderness area. And for anyone not familiar with that area, it is it's the largest national park, forest area in the United States outside of Alaska. So Alaska obviously has some big territories, but it's a very large area. And where we ride is not on frequented trails or heavily cared for trails. We actually ride on old fire trails. So back in the Great Depression era, there was a big focus, I think, from President Roosevelt to try and preserve the trees. They saw the trees as a big resource. And so they made these fire paths so they could go and put out fires to protect the trees. Now, that's not a practice anymore, but they still have the trails. And there's some people who are, diehard backwoodsmen who love to go and ride on them. So to give some perspective on what kind of trail we're riding, because it's very relevant, these fire trails get cut out once a year. And so they'll go in with these big, mules and all kinds of different stuff. They have ordinances where you can't use chainsaws and anything that would disrupt the noise, make it less natural. So they'll go out with these big saws and they'll cut down the trees. And so we went a week after they cut out the trail, and we still would go in with saws, planning to be that we would still have to remove some deadfall, because all it takes is a big windstorm and you've got trees all over the trail. So that's what we're riding in. The trails are pretty sparse. It's not uncommon to lose them for a period of time, and you just need to know the map well. You need to be able to look for where the deadfall have been cut in previous years, so that you can kind of cobble together where the trail might be. So that's kind of the setting. So we were out, and it was the final day, and we had a horse that had not been doing very well. It seemed, at first we thought it was an injury on its leg, but then it would, because it was favoring one leg, but then it would switch. And so we went, it's probably some form of illness, something like that. And so it came to a point where the horse no longer was willing to move, no matter how much encouragement we gave it. And so we spent the better half of the day in the middle of the rain trying to motivate this horse to move so we could get off the mountain, and it refused. And so at that point, we were down a horse, and had to figure out how we were going to get out so that we could figure out what to do next. We made the decision that we would just have one person walk, and then we would trade who would ride horses. I walked out ahead. I had been the navigator on the trip, and so I had a pretty good understanding of the map and where we were going. And by bad luck, bad decision-making on my part, as well as just how the tables turned, I ended up on a trail that followed a very similar trajectory, but then turned pretty suddenly. And when I realized that I must be somewhere wrong, I was not able to find the trail going back, and ended up stranded on a ridge, walking back and forth, and unable to find the trail that had brought me there. I was several miles down, and I had come into a forest of deadfall, which is a bunch of trees strewn about. And I went, oof, there is not a chance we're going to be able to cross this. I probably should wait here for the group to catch me. And then I had been in such a groove. I was moving so quickly while I was hiking. I was not paying as close of attention as I should have to time and a couple other things. And I went, wait a second. There's no way they wouldn't have caught me by now. I know they were dealing with other things. They were eating lunch. They were getting all, the saddle situated since they were down a horse. But I went, there's no way they wouldn't have caught me. And then that's when I realized, oh yeah, I'm in the wrong place. And it felt like being in the middle of the ocean, because I was at least 100 miles away from civilization, like a freeway or anything where I would flag down any kind of car. And I knew that they would have passed me because I must have turned off on one of these old trails. And I went, I don't know how I get out of here. Because even if I can make it back to the trailhead, I don't know if there's going to be a vehicle that's back.
I guess I'm curious about the time frame. So how long had it been since you left the group, and then you realized, wait, something's not right?
Probably only like 2 or 3 hours, I would say.
I mean, you mentioned a little bit about Bitterroot. What's the terrain like? What's the weather? Just what's like the overall setting? Because, somebody from the East Coast, our
Sure.
forest and woods is different from the Northwest.
Yeah, so this is August, and so it still is warm during the days, very cold at night, very cold, and it had been raining all day, and so I had a Drizzabone slicker, which is very water wicking, but my shoes were soaked all the way through to the socks. My pants are are soaking wet. Yeah, so it's pretty chilly. And then as far as the terrain, I mean, you just, for anyone who hasn't been in that kind of country, I mean, you just need to imagine mountains and then another mountain, like a mountain goes down and ends and then the other one starts. And, they're very tall mountains, right? I know mountain means something different to some folks on the East Coast, especially the Midwest. But, we're talking about big, serious mountains, and it just goes on and on and on and on, just you keep going. So basically there's trailheads, for like probably 100 miles, like every 20 miles, there's a trailhead because there's a valley that you can go through to start your trek. Right. And so it just keeps going.
What kind of like wild animals, if any, are out there that you might have feared coming across?
This area is luckily not grizzly bear country. Grizzly bear country would have made me very worried. It is frequented with black bears. We had already seen a black bear that trip, and but black bears, certainly on horseback, I'm never concerned about a black bear. Even on foot, I'm less concerned, but I don't want to mess with it. Cougars scare the crap out of me, and it is definitely cougar country. Yeah, and cougars really scare me.
Did you even have a day pack?
No. Ziploc bag,
Yep.
Nalgene bottle, half-eaten granola bar, and then I've got a Drizzabone slicker and a sweater, which is a heavy slicker. Don't do that. I now travel with a fanny pack that has a number of essential food rations, heat blankets, and also pretty much whenever it was too dark for me to move, but I was too cold to sleep, I would be hitting a rock together or rubbing a stick together to try and start some kind of fire. And if I could have started a fire, I could have sent a message. Like there are, you know what I mean? I could have got out of there. And they've done all kinds of studies on what kind of lighter is the best lighter. Bic. Bic is the best lighter.
Really?
The default lighter is the most reliable lighter.
So when you realized that you were lost, what did you do?
My wife was pregnant with our first son, and she was due in 3 months. So my first thought was, this is it, accept your fate. And the second thought was, you don't get to. You have a duty and a responsibility to this child, so you got to put on your big boy pants and figure it out. I came up with a strategy, and my strategy was, there was an airstrip that we had passed. So it's basically like this cabin, and this one you pay to work there. It's a kind of weird situation they have. So you pay the station at this place, and then there's occasionally some kind of sometimes you get some people who work for the Forest Service who are going to fly in on a tiny little plane to land in this little airstrip, or you get someone who's very wealthy. They're coming out to go hunting or something like that, and they just want to fly in so they can be deep in the backcountry. And we had passed it earlier that day, so I went, I could definitely hike there. If I can get back to the trail, I could get there. They've got some kind of radio relay system. They could figure it out. And who knows, maybe even I go back, and that means I'm going to run into my dad on day 2 when he's coming back. I also was very worried about water. If people don't know the adage, it's 3 days without water for death by dehydration, and 3 weeks without food before you die of starvation. And so I knew that water was something I needed to figure out, because I had a Nalgene bottle it was like a fourth full. And then I had a half-eaten granola bar in my pocket, and that was it. That's all I had on my person. And then, of course, my slicker and sweater. Thank heavens, because then I really would have been in a pickle. So I went, that's my strategy. So then I spent the whole day working through this ridge, walking back the way I came, and trying to find where the turnoff was. I knew that I basically at one point climbed up on this ridge. And so I'm like, if I just walk back on this ridge, I've got to be able to find this. And so I go until I ran into a big cluster of trees, and I'm like, I never saw these. I would have known. Like this, it was dense, it was thick, and I just went, there's no way, something is wrong. I don't know how I've messed this up. So then I started walking the other direction until things started to seem unfamiliar, and then started to get dark, and it was windy. It still had been raining, and I went, oh shoot, I'm not wandering around in the dark, because if I get injured or totally lost, then I don't have a chance. You know what I mean? So I pulled together some logs. I dug a hole and hopped in the hole, took my wet pants and socks off, and just tucked them into my chest. And that was the bleakest night, because I'm on this ridge, super windy, I'm soaked, and I'm just shivering uncontrollably all night. And if anyone's been in that situation, you fall asleep and it feels like you sleep for 2 minutes, and then you wake up and chatter for 15, and then you're out again for 2 minutes. And it makes you feel like you're going insane. And so anyways, it was a pretty rough night. And then I was just waiting for the sun to come up, and the sun finally comes up, and of course it's still cold. And I went, I'm not going to just sit in this hole. I think I'm going to get a lot warmer if I just start moving. So I pull my socks on, which were frozen at this point, just to give you an idea of the temperature. So the socks,
actually
because
frozen?
they were, yeah, like frozen, like you could hit them. You know what I mean? Like,
wow.
So I pull them onto my feet, and then slip into the shoes, and then walk, and then eventually the ice turns to cold water, the cold water turns to warm water, and then you've got a little jacuzzi in your shoes. But anyways, I finally warmed up. I kept trekking south, and once again I hit this point where I was like, this cannot, that I never was here. I never was here. I know I'm on the right ridge. I was not here. So I went, I must have seen something wrong yesterday. There's something that I've learned about since that's called like directional madness. And so it'll happen with Navy SEALs. They'll train them for their navigational course, and they'll drop them. And no matter how much they train them, at least for a period of time, some people it's shorter, some people it's very long, they go in circles. They just go in circles. Even though they got their compass, everything, they'll go in circles. And so some of that had worn down, where I felt a more clear mind. And so I started going north again, and I'm looking, right? I know that I have to turn east. I know there's some trail, there's some outlet I came in, and I'm just looking and I'm looking, and I'm like, that kind of looks like it, but that's not it. And so I keep going. I come to those trees again. I go, I'm just going to cut through them. Maybe I just blocked this out of my brain. I don't know. So I have to cut through this brush, and then all of a sudden I come to this big lake. And I'm like, I would know a lake. I would not forget a lake. There's no way I could be confused. And so I'm getting very frustrated. I'm also decently, I'm starting to feel very thirsty. There's no real water up here. And so I go, I've got to do something. I've got to get off this ridge and go in the correct direction. And so I decided, I saw a ridge that I thought looked like the ridge we had been on previously, and it was directionally correct, at least as far as my mind could recall. So I decided and I missed one other thing, which is there's no cell reception really at all, but I scrambled up to the highest part of this ridge that I was on, and I had my cell phone. I spent a long time. I had 1 bar of service just trying to get a text out or anything, and I could never get anything to send, which was too bad. I scrambled down this mountain. It takes the whole day. It's incredibly steep. I'm holding on to like reeds and stuff to keep my balance so I don't just fall down. But I'm able to find some natural springs, so I'm able to get water, fill up my Nalgene bottle. I also stumble into a huckleberry patch, so I was aware of 2 edible berries, and luckily both were there, and I came across them several times. That's huckleberries and thimbleberries. Thimbleberries is like a wild raspberry. And so I was eating that, and you can only eat so many berries though. And so I would take it at a Ziploc bag, and I just put it in and made kind of this disgusting jam. But it was something. And it's not like I was eating because I was going to starve. It's just because my strategy was to use my body to get out as opposed to wait. I wanted as many calories as I could. So I'd also eat grasshoppers and ants too whenever I'd come across them because I knew they are safe to eat uncooked. The tried and true method when you're lost is that you stay still. Like, especially the scenarios we're talking about in Utah or over by you, there's other people on the trail that are going to come by. Absolutely. Sit down on the trail. Someone will come. You'll get it figured out. I mean, imagine the highest adrenaline you've ever had and then have that for 5 days. It is a trip. And it might sound a little masochistic, but there even are times when I miss it. Never has every minute and every decision counted so much.
It was nonstop adrenaline for 5 days. I mean, it didn't wear you down at all. I mean, it's pure survival mode, but it's just the ability to keep going for 5 days like that is fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, and there were certainly moments, especially with, not having food, as, not very nutritious food anyways. There certainly were moments where, my body had to rest. I was not moving constantly. There were times where I was climbing up ridges and things like that, and it's like, I will just focus on lifting this foot. Like, this foot just needs to go up and we'll find out where it goes down. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's just like lifted up and I'm like, I hope it goes a foot forward and it's not just like a slide. You know what I mean? Because otherwise I'm not making progress. But that was especially when climbing. So like I was saying, I was on this ridge, I come down and then I see this ridge that I thought was the one I was on previously. And so it was a full moon night, or at least it was very bright from the moon. And I rest in the reeds and then I spend the night, because I could see clearly, going up this ridge. And it's so dense that I am like pulling down brush and rolling forward. And I'm just inching my way, right? And then to the fatigue, it's like, okay, I'm going to walk for 10 seconds and then I'm going to rest for 20. You know what I mean? And you're just like pulling out these like intervals, or like that tree. I'm just going to get to that tree and then, you know what I mean? And then I'll rest and then I'll keep going. So anyways, I scramble up this ridge. I finally get to the top in the middle of the night. I have no clue what time. My phone has very little battery left, but I see a airplane in the sky. It seems like a commercial airplane. And so I spend quite a while using my flashlight, because I'm right on top of now another ridge to try and flag it down. It didn't work, but it was worth a try. So I'm on top of this ridge. It was very exhausting to get up there. This is night 2. And now it's the morning and I know that I'm not on the same ridge. Like, right, I spent all this time, all this energy getting this ridge. It is not what I thought it was. And so I'm kind of tired. I'm a little like, I just spent all this energy to do this. What a waste. And then helicopters. I start seeing helicopters flying around. And I will be honest, my first thought was not that they were looking for me. It didn't quite line up with my timetable exactly. I assumed they were doing some kind of surveillance or something like that. But I thought, hey, this I won't have to navigate my way out if I can just, if I can flag them down, I bet we could really do something. And so I see them flying all around, but they just don't seem to be very close to me. So I spend well into the afternoon. I've fashioned a flag out of my sweater on a big stick, and I'm just waiting for one to get close enough. And there's this one that just keeps like snaking its way down the ridge, and then it will turn and then go the other way, and it just keeps getting closer. And I'm starting to get pretty dried out at this point. It's been about a day and a half since I've had some water. And I'm like, we gotta wrap this up. I either need to get rescued or I need to get back down to the river because I'm really thirsty. And I've got to muster the energy to work my way back down this mountain that I've just climbed up, And so finally this helicopter comes and it flies right over my head. It's so close I can read the serial number in the bottom. And I am waving, and I just go, there's no way it can't see me. I can't believe it. I'm out of here. I'm so out of here. And it goes, and I think, oh, it's going to turn around, because it starts to turn. Doesn't turn around. Keeps going. And I go, oh, maybe it's pulling its way around. Keeps going. Keeps going. Maybe it's just doing a big loop. And then it goes over and starts looking at some other mountain ridge somewhere else. And so I've waited all day for this opportunity, and it passes me by. And you would think I would just be so disheartened. And it was disappointing. So I'm like, all right, maybe they weren't looking for me. Maybe he thought I was just trying to be friendly. Who knows? But I just went, there was actually a level of relief just because it was so stressful watching and waiting. And it was like, okay, it's just on me. It's me. I have to be the one to figure it out. There's no shortcuts. I've wasted this time. I've wasted this energy. New plan. I'm not going to try and get back to the station, because at this point, if this isn't the ridge, I don't know where it is. So I just need to go east. I knew that east was the direction of the trailhead, and then another, I don't know, once you get to the trailhead, you can walk down a road at least, maybe you run into a car, but at the very least, eventually, I'm going to get to the highway. And I go, I've got water, right? Because there's a river right here in this valley. I've got water. I'm finding plenty of berries and bugs. I'm just going to take it slow. I'm going to go at a sustainable pace. And my goal that I set for myself was 1 month. I said, go whatever speed you need to. 1 month is the goal to get out of here. So if that means you take a whole day to rest, fantastic. Doesn't matter. Like we just got to keep going east and stop, wasting energy, climbing up a mountain, things like that. So I scramble back down, and I'm in a river. And so the brush is so thick. And it actually, I know now, this river, there was an old trail that used to run by it. Probably hadn't been cut out for maybe 5, 10 plus years. It is so covered in trees, you can't walk next to this river. So you are either like walking on a sheer cliff, or you're climbing over mountains and mountains of these just trees. So I'm just hopping in the river, just from stone to stone. I'm working my way through. And then becomes night. I sleep for a little bit. My strategy generally was to sleep when the sun was beginning to set, because then it was warm enough. I would get some level of rest. And then I didn't know, because I didn't, at this point my phone is dead, and I really didn't care what time it was, right? Like it doesn't matter. But I would assume it generally was somewhere between like 2 or 4 in the morning is when I would wake up, and I would be too cold to sleep. And so anyway, so I wake up, it was light enough that I could move slowly through the river, right? I had to really focus. And so I'm just inching my way, because I might as well be moving to stay warm. I'm just working my way down this river because it's going east. So anyways, that happens. Now it's the next day. The river starts to veer, and it no longer is going east. And so I have to make the decision, do I follow the river and hope that leads me to someplace interesting? Or do I go east? And so I make the decision to go east.
I think people don't really think about going out, getting lost like this, because you just assume what you're doing, where you're going, and you wouldn't need those things.
It's interesting because, of course people ask, oh, would you, are you scared of the mountains now? Would you never? And I'm like, are you kidding me? I've never been more confident. I've been in the worst case scenario, and I survived that. Like I feel incredible up in the wilderness, but you also become much more aware. So I'm on this dry ridge. I'm out of energy. I'm next to this spring, and I just can't move. I just can't move anymore. My body kind of breaks down. It's been 3 nights lost. So my wife actually found out I was lost after 48 hours, which was really bleak, because it wasn't like, oh, shoot, maybe we find him. It's like, he's lost, but he's been lost for a while. You know what I mean? And so and that was the only stat that I really knew well. And so I went, okay, Which they did. When they were looking for me, they had corpse dogs out there sniffing. And they had some like heat surveillance they did out of the helicopters. They thought for sure they had a read that I was in the lake, that my body was in the lake. And so there were all kinds of, and yeah, there were like some mystics there. There were, people were missing, like, oh, I know where he is. I sense he's in the lake. So while I'm on this ridge, and since I don't have the energy to keep moving my legs, I decide to dismantle my phone and see if I can create a spark, either crushing my battery, which I hear has an odd of generating a spark, as well as taking apart my camera and seeing if I can do like a magnifying glass effect with the sun. I end up spending the night on this ridge. So this is night 4. And I wake up and I'm just like, oh, I still don't want to move. And this is when I start hearing a cougar growling. And it is not far. It's just on the other side of the river. So it's like maybe, I don't know, half a mile. Sounded like, and I just, okay, I don't want to be here anymore. So I kept going, really, really hard going, because I'm not by the water. I'm getting, dehydrated pretty easily. I'm several days into this by now. Finally get to some more berries, which, the huckleberries are very, they're like a blueberry, right? So they're decently hydrating. And so I'm eating those. I decide to lay down, and I wake up to the sound like a and to this day, I can't tell you if it was a bear sniffing my head. It sounded incredibly close, or if I dreamt it. I really could not tell you. All I know is I heard that, I woke up, I stood up, and I walked away. So anyways, I keep walking, and finally the ridge starts to descend, and I see a big river. And I go, oh, big river, that's a great sign. I wouldn't be surprised if there was a trail next to it. Oh, I really hope there's a trail. So I keep going, and every time I go down, I'm like, oh, why isn't that a trail? Like, I keep seeing things that I think are a trail. Finally, I get almost right up to the river, and not only is there a trail, it's a well-manicured trail, and there are human footprints on the trail. So I go, incredible. I finally have a trail. I've been off trail at this point pretty much the whole time, right? For like 4 days. I have a trail. It's heading the right direction. This is an inlet trail. This is going to take me right to the trailhead. And it's not so deep that there are people who are trekking in here on foot. So I can totally get out of here. If they can get in, I can get out. So my ligaments, like in my foot and walking is a little generous. I'm hobbling. My shoes are totally split out the sides. So they're almost completely disconnected. And I have lost a level of weight that my pants fit. They were Levi jeans. They fit going in. And in order for me to keep them up, I've got to put my thumb through the belt loop on the right side and pull it all the way to the one on the left side and hold it together to just keep my pants from not falling down, just because I'm burning so many calories and obviously not replenishing with a lot. But I'm skipping, air quotes skipping. I'm just so happy. And I'm walking, and I see a little baby duck, and oh, what a cute baby duck. You know what I mean? I'm in a Disney movie as I'm working down this trail, and then the wind blows in, and a huge storm rolls in, and I start laughing, because this whole time I've been grappling with, is it my fate to die or to survive? I can't figure it out. And I finally have this good news, and then this big wrench comes in to thwart my plan, and it's just funny. You know what I mean? It's kind of a gallows humor, maybe. And it felt like it was out of a Looney Tunes movie, but up on this ridge, because I'm in a valley walking next to this river, up on this ridge, lightning strikes, hits the mountain, and rock and a tree crumbles and begins to fall down the mountain. And it is wild. The wind is blowing. There are old dead trees that are to my left that are falling down. And so whenever I go through one of these dead tree clearings, I'm like kind of hobbling quickly just because I don't want one to fall and land on me. And like I said, it was humorous. It was just so odd that it was humorous. I keep going. I go way too late. I go until I almost can't see, which was a mistake because I was just too eager. I get hardly any sleep. I wake up because I'm so deep in this valley. And the moon was not as bright; it was more covered. I can't see much, but I can see just enough to keep moving. So I just inch because I do not want to lose this trail, right? Like the odds of losing the trail are decently low. I mean, I am in a valley next to a river, but still, it's just like I don't want to take any chances. So I'm just inching, inching, inching. As I keep going, eventually I see this bright light shining through the trees at me. And my first thought is, aliens. Why not just aliens too? Like everything else has happened. Why not aliens? Like I think God is going to show me aliens and then he's going to actually kill me. He's been threatening this whole time. Now he's actually going to do it. This has just been a big tour for me. And so I just approach cautiously, keep going down the trail. I hear some big animals moving around, and so I'm trying to be cautious. But finally, I'm able to see that the light seems to be a headlamp that someone has set up on top of their tent, which is a weird thing to do, but it was fortunate for me. And I'm able to see the outline of horses' ears passing. And so I go, fantastic, a person. There's a person. And I assumed, because I'm now like several mountains south. Is that right? Yeah, south of where the other trailhead was. So I knew that I was going to a trailhead that wouldn't be terribly far, maybe a few miles away, but I was, a whole ravine or two south. And so I went, I don't think this is like someone looking for, I think this is just a camper or it's a trail cutting crew because there were a number of horses there. And I was worried about them having like a weapon or some kind of other thing. I didn't want them to think that I was a bear. So I stood a fair distance away and just started to yell, which was weird because I hadn't talked the whole time. So it was weird to hear my voice after 5 days of silence, They do recommend that you should talk to yourself if you're ever
I was thinking
alone.
about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
That
they
makes
recommend
sense,
that.
yeah.
I did not do that. I don't know. I had plenty of conversations in my head, but I didn't talk audibly. But they recommend you do that. So, anyways, I just call out and I just say, "I need help. I'm lost." And all of a sudden, this energetic middle-aged lady throws open the tent, and she says, "Are you Kaden?" I said, "I am Kaden. That's me." And she just comes and gives me a big hug. And she was a part of this search party that my parents had put together. Search and rescue does not like family putting together search parties. It's a big no-no because generally what happens is they send out this search party and they end up needing to rescue the search party because they get lost. They're not experienced enough. My dad was able to persuade them just because he has a lot of connections that are serious people. And so they finally signed off on it. Also, at that point, I'd been lost for 4 days. So they were kind of like, it's the harm. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like I can't let you go on a trip. You know what I mean? It's not like I can't stop you from going in. So anyways, this group, my dad had put together, I think there was something like 40 or 60 people that from his connections and my connections, my friends here in Utah, who are out looking, and most of them were focused in the two north ravines. I'm trying to go where I would have been days and days ago. And this group was someone that he had sold a horse trailer to. And they had just come, they wanted to help. And he's like, really don't need anyone else. But you know where you should go is you should go down Bear Canyon. That was the trail that I was on. You should go down Bear Canyon. It's really beautiful. And who knows? Maybe he'll just be down there. But most likely, just plan on having a great trip. That was his pitch to them. And that was exactly who I walked into the camp with. So anyways, it was awesome. They had these satellite phones that they had equipped. We were able to send out a message that said I was rescued. Everyone was, of course, I didn't see it, but at home, huge celebration at HQ, just because, they, I would, most everyone who was in that search party thought I was alive. They had, some kind of spiritual reason or just belief in me or wishful thinking, whatever it is, they thought. But there were a lot of people who did not think that I was alive, which, like I said, fair point. This is night 5 at this point, with no contact. They've been running helicopters. They've got dogs. They've got all kinds of things looking for me. And so everyone obviously was not disappointed that I survived. They were happy I survived. And they had a kit, kind of a revive kit for me, medicines. They didn't know, if I had a broken leg or something, anything could happen. I just very gingerly nursed some food, right? My stomach was not quite ready for normal food. Your digestion track, similar to like how you exercise, your digestion track can slow down hardcore when you're in those kinds of situations. There were just a lot of weird things in that way. But we're talking. I'm so excited. I can't wait to see everyone. You know what I mean? And just like it's guaranteed, it's happening. We're getting out of here. And so I finally begin to feel this level of relief. So I drift off to sleep. I'm warm, right? They've got sleeping bag for me. And then I wake up suddenly and I'm burning hot, and then I'm ice cold, and my heart is palpitating just like a million miles a minute. And I thought I was having a heart attack, which I still thought, great, I really am going to die. But the only thing I can piece together what it was is it was just me finally coming down off of the high. I finally felt safe. I felt a level of peace and relief, and my body just let go of all the stuff that it was holding on to. And it was just a big reaction when that happened. Yeah, I don't know how long it lasted for. It felt like a lifetime, but it finally subsided, and I was able to get to sleep. They had extra horse for me. So we rode. The guy was very kind. He had to go on foot because one of their horses was having issues. And so he had to go on foot, but he had some knee problems. And so I was not doing great, but watching him, I was like, I kept offering, I can walk, like we could take a turn and we can walk, just because he was struggling up the mountain. I felt bad that he was doing that in my behalf. But anyways, we get to the top. The sheriff or whoever it was who's in charge of my rescue was there. He had a helicopter, flew me, and I was able to go meet up with my family at a private airport, and was able to go home and rest and try and recover. That's my story. That's what happened to me. And something interesting is I get a lot of hindsight on what exactly happened, because I actually went back the next year with my dad, and we retraced some steps to try and figure out what happened. And so we saw where the trail diverted, and it was very interesting. On foot, you could not see the trail I was on. You could only see this other trail. And when we went, we walked, a few miles in my shoes the way I went. And him and I were not able to find the trail either to get back. And luckily knew there was a chance of that. And so we had memorized, all of the landmarks and things like that, so that we could kind of navigate ourselves back, which made me feel better, because I thought I was going to be very ashamed when I went back and and got lost.
That's amazing. How was your wife during all of this?
Yeah. No, she was a rock. I think anyone who's been through traumatic events, you block some stuff out. You know what I mean? And so I think she has recognized and relayed to me certain moments of, serious darkness, right? Thinking about being left alone. Um, but she was very optimistic, very encouraging, and she had some form of witness and confidence that she felt like I was going to be okay against all the odds. But I guess her car ride up, because she was visiting her mother while I was on the trip in Colorado, and so they drove through the night to go to my parents' home. And she didn't have a lot of information. All she knew was I had been gone for 48 hours and we were trying to find me, and that was it. And it was pretty bleak. I think it was pretty bleak.
Was there any situation where you maybe like hallucinated or thought something was happening that wasn't actually happening?
I was really fortunate that I didn't have anything that bad. I did have a couple moments of mental oddity. The first was when I first was like, all right, I got to figure this out. I mentioned that directional madness. My self-talk was weird, and I was very conscious of it, but it was like kind of toxic optimism, basically. And so it was like, you're going to do this. Just keep going. Oh, just keep going, and then we'll find it. And then it was like I started to leave the ridge, like I'm walking away from the ridge and starting to descend. And my brain is like, it's fine. Just keep moving. That's what's most important. And it took a while to be like, no, that's terrible advice. Like, shut up, brain. The other thing that drove me nuts, but what my brain would do that drove me batty, is that it would grab clips from TV shows or songs and it would repeat them over and over and over and over. And some of them were like 5 seconds long. And so and it would just happen. And I hate repetition just as a person. And it just was just like, oh my gosh, like pick another clip. And so I'm like, try and think of something else. So I think of something else, and then that clip would just go over and over and over and over. It was very aggravating.
I mean, do you have like aftermath trauma?
Like I said, I was very fortunate. I kept my wits. I've watched interviews of other people who've come off the mountain, and they're like bananas. They've like pooped themselves, and they're just like walking around. You know what I mean? Like they're totally out of their minds. I was, I was in a state of mind where I was making jokes at the airport. Don't kiss me. I haven't brushed my teeth for 5 days. You know what I mean? All kinds of just different things. Like I still had my wits. So I was fortunate that my PTSD was decently short-lived. I think from start to finish, it was probably like 6 months. And so I rested for probably like 3 or 4 days. I was just in bed. You know what I mean? My bone, my ligaments and stuff just catching up, and you know what I mean? Just not moving a whole lot, eating, getting my appetite back up so that I could eat the amount that I needed to. And when I drove home, there was some song I was listening to, and it's from Head in the Heart. And it basically says something like, brother, don't worry about me. And it was just like a moment of seeing the situation through the search party's eyes. Because my whole family was out there, right? My brother was out there. Both my brothers were out there. And so thinking about them and what they must have felt and the amount of powerlessness that would have created, and how I would have hated to be in that situation. I would take the situation I was in over that situation anytime, just because that would have, you have no control. And I think just being able to see it from their perspective, like an outsider's perspective, made it very real. You know what I mean? And just the reality of it kind of came crashing. So that was the first big PTSD episode, which is just like uncontrollable sobbing. And I'm not a I'm not, and it's not like crying or like I'm sad or I'm scared, but it's like vomiting. And it was that sensory, like exactly the same as when my jeans were soaked on that first night. And it wasn't immediate, but it like triggered the beginning of it. And I was like, and I was about to go to work, and I was like, I'm just going to have to be late to work. So I drove and just bawled in the parking lot until I was ready to come up. So I think there were 5 different episodes like that happened. And then luckily it eventually just left. There were some lingering effects though. One is just, like my fuse, my ability to handle stress without it really affecting me. It was at least about a year where it was not, you know what I mean? Just like my ability to handle something, like it would just, my emotion would go pretty full throttle. Not like I was yelling or screaming or hitting or anything, but it was like there'd be loud noises or someone would be debating something. And I'm just like, I got to be somewhere else. Like I can't handle this. And then the other part of that, and I think related, frankly, is, I at the time I was working out a lot. I really liked to go to the gym, and it took me well over a year before I could go back to the gym, just because it felt kind of sacrilegious to my like survival instinct, if that makes sense. Like I would get hyped up, you know what I mean? You'd get angry, you'd bring your rage out, whatever. And all that felt very inappropriate, or like work. If I'd get behind at work, it's like, all right, I got to just buckle down. I got to power through. There was none of that. I couldn't do it. So my, like, literally my energy and motivation had to come from a different place, because trying to like tap into like anger, or like some people might call it like kind of a manic state, where you're just, it's like, I know what that's for, and it's not for this. It's for not dying. And it just, it didn't feel appropriate ever to evoke it. And I would say I'm still sensitive to that, but it's different now. Now it's more existential, in the sense of I have a different perspective on life and what life ought to be and what it ought not to be, and what makes it meaningful and worth living. And I just value it that much more. And so my tolerance for just like putting up with things I don't want to do is lower, just because it's like, sweet, let's cut and run. What's the worst that can happen? You know what I mean? And so that's a lasting effect, but that's an effect that has been so rich. I don't want to lose it. You know what I mean? That's, I don't want to live in the past, but it's one of the reasons I'm in no rush to forget about this experience or have it not be something talk about or think about, just because it's brought a level of meaning to my life that has been so fruitful. And that's why I always tell people, like, I would never choose a version of reality, an alternative universe, whatever, where this didn't happen to me, because it has made the life that I've lived since so much sweeter, because I actually know what death is, and by inverse know what life is. Do you know what I mean? And it just makes it that much richer.
Like right after, I guess, how did that affect you? And at the time, were you okay with talking about it right off the bat?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So first, because the horse had issues, that was a tiny part of the story. It wasn't my horse. I had nothing to do with the horse. I wasn't even the one riding the horse. It was just a horse in our party. There were a number of animal rights activists who felt that we were not giving equal attention to the care of the horse. And so there was a lot of backlash my family was dealing with. And then when I was pronounced safe, they started coming to me, DMing me, you know what I mean, sending me messages, all kinds of different things. At the time, we had a Facebook group with updates, and we had to shut that down because it was just getting weird. And like I said, my capacity to handle that kind of stuff was so diminished that it really affected me. But it goes much deeper than that. I received a number, and I want to stress this too, the community was so positive. There was so much positive, so many people came out of the woodworks who cared, who tried to find ways to help, that, prayed, that, all kinds of different ways that they showed up. But I learned a really valuable lesson. I was not looking for attention. I didn't even ask for media coverage. I just happened to get lost and tried to not die. And that still attracted a number of people who had a hot take. I had people message me and say, I was a police for X and X amount of years. I saw people with more survival skills than you die. You need to let everyone know all the mistakes that you made and be accountable to that, because you're, basically you don't deserve to survive based on the decisions you made. There were these internet sleuths. There's some groups, I guess, that try and find missing people. And so they're knocking around all kinds of theories. And they're going, yeah, no, this case is simple case of suicide. You know what I mean? He's about to have a kid. He's too stressed. So he wants to kill himself. Or, well, sounds like he's fighting with his family and he's just irresponsible. So there's all kinds of this stuff going around. If enough people know your name, if enough people have heard you talk, there's going to be some hate. Someone gave some really good advice because, of course, the news outlets, I want to do a story. They said, don't do all the stories. They said, just tell them I will tell the news one time. And then I did some soul searching of just, what does this mean for me? It'll be 5 years this year. This September will be 5 years.
Glad you survived.
Thanks. Me too.
Obviously, because now you have 2 sons. Do you plan on telling them the whole story at some point?
I think so. My kind of idea that, so my son, my firstborn son, his middle name is actually the first name of one of the rescuers. It was a husband and wife. And so his middle name is Brett, after one of the rescuers. And then if I ever have a girl, her middle name will be Robin, after the wife in that duo. So there's some namesake, there's some familiarity there. But as far as when I would tell them, I think it's kind of a weird thing to bring up. You know what I mean? Around the dinner table. Yeah, I don't know. I think just when they ask the question is when I'll give them the information.
Because it seems like your family is very much outdoorsy. So I assume like at some point you're going to take them on trips and do all that fun stuff with them. Yeah.
One of my favorite things to talk about is just how different my life is because I almost died. And I think there's some lessons that have really enriched my life that I would hope would do the same for someone else. But I also don't know if you have to go through it in order to feel it. Like, I don't know if it's really teachable or not. But I had a bit of a paradigm shift. I told you I accepted my fate very quickly. I was comfortable with that. I'm not someone actually, as a young kid, I was incredibly terrified of death. Probably too young. I was very worried about it. I don't know why, but I was obsessed with death. I was always, we'd go sledding. I'd go, what if I do this? And then I fall in the river and then I get cold and then I get hypothermia and I die. Like, I was that kid. I was so worried all the time. That I think I had to confront death very young. And I remember being on a camping trip with my dad, and you'll always hear stuff moving around, animals and stuff. And it freaks you. It just freaks you out. And just as a kid, just sitting there and just, a bear's going to get in, it's going to eat me, and it's, and I'm going to die, and that's going to be awful. And then just finally, just like needing to come to this level of acceptance of just, it's okay. Everyone dies. And if it happens, I just hope I'm asleep when it happens. So why don't I calm down and go to sleep? And so I felt like I had to come to a level of acceptance young, and which was a huge benefit to me. I never want to get rid of that. I think everyone ought to spend a lot of time thinking about death and trying to make peace with it. But the one change I want to make, if ever I'm in that situation again, which I'm not planning on, but if I was, is that my first thought might be, if I die, that's okay, but I don't want to die. I'm having too much fun. I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm not ready for this chapter on life to be over yet. And that's been kind of a personal mission for me, is trying to figure out what makes what makes life so great that you never want it to end? You know what I mean? But I think every day trying to see it as a gift and trying to create a life that feels like heaven every day. That for me has been the big fruit. And sometimes I have approached it too aggressively, of like zero tolerance, like, why am I suffering? If I'm suffering, cut and run. You know what I mean? But life doesn't always work like that. There still are rules, there still are things that have to happen in life.
Do you feel stronger because of this experience?
I mean, I think I noted that I definitely feel more confident in the woods, but I think I do. I think confidence is built through being in hard situations that you think you can't do, and then you do it. And I think I've been in a lot of those well before this experience, but I think this was such a big one. You know what I mean? That it creates a level of confidence and strength of like it gives some perspective, right? Of like, how big is this? How big is this report that has to be done before Friday compared to this? And what is the perspective of it? And I think the increased perspective, as well as just the increased confidence, creates some strength where you can be alone and know that you're okay. You know what I mean? You know that you'll be okay. Or you can be in unfamiliar territory and you can say, yeah, now I can figure this out. I'm pretty confident myself, so I think I can figure this out.
Is there any like final words or advice that you'd give to somebody if they're ever in this kind of a situation?
Yeah. I'll give some practical advice and then some like mental advice that I think would be relevant no matter what you have. Because I think there's, like I said, supplies do a lot, right? So the lighter, a map, water, knowledge of, I didn't really talk about it, but it's very fortunate I had the knowledge I did of what things were edible and not. And I would not consider myself like some kind of big buff on edible. Like, I just happened to have been in these mountains enough growing up. We'd pick huckleberries, we'd put them in our pancakes for breakfast, that we'd make on the hiking trip. Like, it's just, I'd been around them enough, but it's not like I studied it, but I think, knowledge of some things that are edible. I've actually done more research on it since, just because it was such a benefit. And I think it's cool. Don't go alone. That was a big no-no of just the woods, especially if you're going to be in the backcountry like that. If you're going on a hike, the trail, you've been before, you're not that far from civilization, whatever. That's a totally different situation. And then I think mentally, I think grappling with death and finding peace with death is an incredible, it can make you calm in most storms. Because if you're someone who fears death, and it's not just survival situations, but if you are someone who lives with an immense fear of death, or frankly, probably fear in general, if you're riddled with a lot of fear and anxiety, I think you're pretty easy to be blown about. And I think if you can find a level of peace within yourself, that goes a long way. And then I think the other one, which we kind of alluded to, is be in hard situations and overcome them and develop some confidence that you're able to navigate unfamiliar situations. And then the big one, which everyone says, and so maybe it makes it less meaningful, is stay calm and don't move until you've got your wits about you. Like, if you can't sit down, if you need to talk to yourself, whatever, but if you find yourself in a situation that's very dangerous, it could go either way, haste is not the right answer. You can put yourself in a really bad situation. You know what I mean? I mean, think how different the story would have been if I would have been too eager and would have fallen and broken my leg. As scared as you might be, you will only be more scared with the outcome if you panic and try and move quickly. So do whatever you need to do. Set whatever rules with yourself you need to set to wait until your brain is in a safe place, Yeah, and once again, in matters of life or death is going to happen to all of us.
Thank you so much for doing this. We really do appreciate it. It was a pleasure speaking with you about your experience.
Yeah, it was lovely to share with you all. That was great.
Thank you, Kaden. We'd like to thank Kaden for sharing his unforgettable journey of endurance, survival, and human resilience.
We'll have information on our website in the show notes about Montana's Bitterroot Wilderness, Kaden, and even information about what it takes to survive in the wilderness. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Bound by the Cloak. You can find us on X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and of course, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, CastBox, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, let others know. Rate and review us on any of the podcast apps you use. Thanks for listening to this episode of Bound by the Cloak. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.
Until next time.